So today, on this windy, rainy day, I was trying to think of what I could talk to you about. And so I've decided that I'm going to talk about cones. Not an ice cream cone, although that would be not too bad right now, but another kind of cone. Can you think of another kind of cone besides an ice cream cone? Pine cone, right, a pine cone. So trees that have, and they could be shrubs too, that have cones belong to a group called conifer. And cone is almost part of that, isn't it? Right there. Conifer. All conifers are cone producers. And as I said, they can be shrubs, which means it's sort of like a tree, but with many different trunks. Or they could be trees that have the one trunk. And they also have needle-shaped leaves or scaly leaves. And that is the conifers. And we have lots of them here where I live. Another thing about those conifer, they can either be scaly or needly leaves, is that they are never ever anything but green. They are ever green, evergreen. Now, it doesn't mean that the needles or the scaly leaves last forever. It just means that they last a long time. And when they finally do die and fall off, they don't fall all off together. A pine is always losing needles, and you can find them underneath a pine tree, but it doesn't lose all its needles at once. So it doesn't have to use all that energy to make every single leaf back every year because the needles are the leaves. Conifers can be identified by their cones. And so I have boxes filled with cones. I used lettuce containers to put them in. They're plastic and they're really easy to keep them all together, and they have a domed top, so you can put them on. And so I want to show you some cones, but before I do, I need to talk about this because I made these cards. I might as well use them. So cones can be either male or female, just like us. I'm a female. You, if you're a girl, you would be a female. And if you're a boy, you would be a male. And so, male or female, I don't call cones girls or boys because they're plants, they're not people. Okay. And those cones, depending on whether they're male or female, they can have either seeds in them or pollen. Now, you may have heard about pollen. Maybe mom or dad have told you that you have allergies, or you may have noticed it. For me, the Memorial Day weekend is my worst time ever because that's when the pines and the oaks are both putting pollen in the air, and pollen gets up my nose and it makes my eyes water and really itchy, and the back of my throat really itchy, and I sneeze a lot. And so if I don't take my medicine, it gets really, really bad. So sometimes it's hard to even open my eyes. So allergy medicine is really, really good because these pollens from the conifers are spread in the wind. So let's talk about the cones before we talk about the pollen and the seeds anymore. So cones are made up of scales, and that can be pointy parts that are coming out. And some of them even have little prickers at the end of them. We'll talk about that in a second. And cones are made from changed leaves. So the scales on the cones are changed leaves, and they make up that cone. Now, male cones are really tiny. And I'm going to show you when I glued it onto this card. And so hopefully, come on, it's going to stay on the card when I lift the card up. So it's really tiny. Here's my finger so you can see. And when they're filled with pollen, they're yellow and they're at the tips of the branches down low in the tree. Male cones don't have seeds in them. So what was the other thing that they could have? Do you remember the word that began with a P? Pollen, right, pollen. And so they're filled with yellow pollen dust. There's so much pollen in one cone, tons of pollen. And then there's many, many thousands of cones on a tree. And so I went by on a pond. I was on a boat at a camp nearby. I was driving the boat, which is very exciting. And we were in the middle of the pond and we were looking at the shoreline. And all of a sudden I thought, is that a fire? Is that smoke from a fire? And then I watched it again and I thought, no, it's coming out of the tree. It was this huge clouds of yellow dust were coming out of the tree. The tree looked like it was all smoky. And I was like, I hope that cloud doesn't come across the pond toward us because then we'll be all sneezing. But that's how much pollen. That's just from one tree. It looked like the tree was smoking. It was so full of pollen. Sometimes that happens with red cedars. If you have red cedars around and you brush up against them and then you see all this yellow dust, that's the pollen. As soon as this male cone loses its pollen, it falls off the tree. And so you'll find them along your driveway edge or along your sidewalk. So cones contain pollen, and then they fall off the tree soon after the pollen is gone. So usually by the middle of June around here, the pines are all done with their pollen, and then there's other plants putting pollen in there. And the pollen sacs, there's two on each scale, and they develop underneath those scales. And so if you looked at a male cone with a hand lens, you could see it looks like a tiny female cone. It has all these little scales pointing out all the way up it. And underneath each one of them, there are two sacs that are filled with pollen. Pollen is carried by the wind. And so the pollen cones are going to be at the edges of the tree, down low, because that tree doesn't want the male pollen from it to fertilize its own cones. It wants to get pollen from the trees around it. And so the pollen cones tend to be lower in the tree, and that way they can get in the wind and they can fly away from the female. And the female parts of the pine tree can catch pollen from other trees. And so it just helps them to be good, healthy cones and good, healthy seeds, right? A pollen grain is super, super tiny. And it reminds me of Princess Leia in Star Wars. Or it could even be a bug head. So when you look at it, this is what it looks like. Isn't that strange? And the dot in the center, the pollen's even smaller than that. You need a microscope to see it. And then these things here, those are its wings. Don't they look like Princess Leia's hair in the first Star Wars? When she, I guess in that Star Wars, did she find out she was Luke's sister? I'm not sure, but anyway, these are the wings. And so the pollen can fly very, very well in the wind and travel to others. Now, if the male cones have the pollen, the microscopic dust, the male parts there, what do the females have? What do you think? Here's a female cone. What do you think it has inside there? What could it be? It's going to be bigger than the microscopic pollen. Do you know? Seeds. Seeds. It has seeds. And so you can figure out how many seeds this pine cone has by counting up every one of the scales and then multiplying it times 2. Because down, and I'm going to pull one off. Let's see if I can get one without totally destroying everything. All right. If you pull one off, can you see the 2 cubbies up here? A seed would sit in each one. One seed here, one seed there. And then down here would be the wing that the seed has. Each seed has one wing. It has the best name ever, and I didn't write it down, but it's achene, A-C-H-E-N-E. And they would have one seed, one wing on each side. And there's sort of a mid-rib like a leaf has down the middle. And so we could, here's a seed. Can you see the seed? I don't know. I'll have to lift it up, 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 and bring it over to the camera. Can you see it in my hand? It is kind of tiny, isn't it? I'll try to back it up a little bit. Yeah, that's a seed. The seeds are heavier than the wing. We're going to talk about dispersal in a second. So, recapping, female cones contain seeds. How many? We'd have to figure it out, right? Each seed has a wing called the achene. Let me write that. A-C-H-E-N-E. A-C-H-E-N-E. And then the seeds at the tip of the wing. And so the wing spirals down and the seed would hit the ground. Now, a cool thing about cones is that even ones that are laying on the ground right now on this rainy day, they're closing. They're closing. They're not live anymore. They're not attached to the tree, but they're able to open and close. And the way that they do that is they absorb the moisture. So I did an experiment. I love experiments. So I collected some cones and I put this cone, and it looked like this. I put this cone in this bag at 2:55 this afternoon. And then I checked it an hour later, and look at it. It's closed. Can you see that through the bag? It's closed. Let me take it out. Ooh, it's wet. Look at the difference between the two. Now, why would a cone close up? Can you think of why? It has something to do with the seeds. Okay, so when the cone, the seeds in the cone get pollinated, so the daddy part, the male part, goes into the scales and it gets to where the mommy part is. And that's called fertilization. And a seed is going to develop. The cone closes up. I must protect my seeds. And so it will stay closed up until the seeds are ripened. But it doesn't want to let them go on a day like today. I don't know if you can hear the wind and the rain hitting the windows. If it did, if it let them go, all that water in the air, all that moisture would collect on the seed, and the seed would just go boink to the ground. Now it's going to land underneath the mommy daddy tree, the parent tree. And they're never ever anything but green. And so what's that baby not going to get? Sunlight. It's not going to get sunlight, right? So the seed needs to travel. So what the cone does, it's waiting on the tree, waiting on the tree, waiting on the tree until the seeds are ripe. And then it opens when the seeds are going to have the best chance. So the cone, the smart cone, trees are amazing the more we find out about them. The cone will open on a dry, warm day. So this is going to be like the end of the summer, September, the end of August, maybe. The cones are going to open up and the seeds are going to fall out. And when they fall out, they need to spiral away. And so that is why if you find a cone on the ground, you can do my experiment. You can put it in a zipper bag that either has the slide lock or you press it to zip it up, and just put some water in the bag, shake the bag up and dump the water out, put the cone in there and zip it up tight. And it probably didn't even take an hour, but I waited an hour because I forgot. I'm older. So I forgot to go check, but luckily it was within an hour. So I know it closes within an hour. And then see if your cone closes, okay? So cones open and close. Now, this is super cool, and I just found this out. This is how the scale closes. So can you see my two seeds? And they have their little achene, their little wing. And so what scientists have discovered is that the cells on the outside of each one of the scales absorbs moisture. It puffs it up. And as it puffs the scale up, the scale is puffing up over here. It pushes the scale closed. And then when the scale is dry, and these cells are dry, they're not putting that force anymore, and the scale opens. So even if the pine cone is off the tree, the scales still absorb moisture and close, dry, and open. They don't need life to do it. It's just in what they're made out of, which I think is super cool. So you can go from this to this, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, for as long as the seed is together, as long as the cone is together. So that's how the cones open and close, which I think is super cool. Now, I'm going to show you some other kinds of cones. So this one that has a stem that I've been showing you right along, they have stems on them. This is called a white pine cone. It's pretty open. It has big scales. You can see that it's pretty open. And squirrels love them. They just snip it, drop it, and peel it, and they eat the seeds inside. Now, chickadees will go in with their beak, and then there's this really cool bird that you have to look up the picture for. It's called a crossbill, and its bill is crossed, which is pretty cool. But that's so perfect for getting in there and getting those seeds out, and they eat the seeds as well. People can eat the pine seeds as well. And so that's white pine. White pine has needles in a bunch, and the bunch is 5 needles. W-H-I-T-E. White. It spells its name. Sometime I'll bring in branches and we can look at those. One of my favorite, these are so big and so heavy. I'm so glad that I've never had one drop on my head. But this is from a Norway spruce. Isn't this amazing? Look at how big it is. And I don't know if you can see in this camera, but each scale has little teeth on it. Tick, 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 tick. Right? And there's many, but we could still figure out, right? Two seeds, we could count them up, but boy, that would take a long time. And it doesn't have a stem. And that is really cool. Somebody told me, oh, you can tell the difference between fir trees and spruce trees because spruce cones stand and fir cones fall. And it's actually the opposite, you know. So that sometimes we make up things because they sound good and they're not true. Here's another spruce cone. This is, I believe, from a white spruce. And it reminds me of a hedgehog. Isn't that cool? All you need to do is make 2 little ears and maybe a little nose, and it would be a little hedgehog. And so this one is much smaller. Black spruce has small cones as well. And here is a pitch pine. Now, where I live, we have lots of pitch pine. Pitch pine trees, people would take the pitch, the resin from the pine, and they would make it into, I believe, turpentine. They would also use the pitch to seal barrels. And so we have lots of pitch pine around here. And just like a pitchfork, pitch pine has 3 needles, not 5. It has 3. Somebody told me you could remember because 3 pitches that you don't hit are strikes. So, but I'd rather just say pitchfork. It helps for me. And when pitch cones are new, pitch pine cones are new, they have spines on them. I don't know if you can see the points that are there underneath there. Ouchie, ouchie, ouchie. And pitch pine cones don't have a stem like the white pine. So I don't know, the squirrels get them and like, ow, 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 as they're trying to bite it off the tree. But they do, they manage to do it and they peel it. There are some woods nearby in a state forest. And the red squirrels take the Norway spruce and they just peel them and they make huge trash piles called middens. And I saw a couple of middens. They must have been maybe 2 feet, 2 feet high. All trash piles, all the pieces that they peeled off to eat the seeds in there. So pitch pine cones have spines on them to protect them, but the squirrels still can get them. But it must stop them a little bit. And again, you can count up how many seeds by counting up the scales. Pitch pine cones can stay on the pine tree for years after they've dropped their seeds. With most pine trees, it takes a year or 2 for the seeds to develop, them to ripen and develop and be ready to spread. And then talking about the seeds, okay, I wanted to do this because this one has some seeds in it. Let's see if we can get them to come out. Yeah. I'll try to send them up higher. Can you see them dropping as they're coming by? I'm not really giving them too much space, but if I take a seed and I drop it, it's just goes straight down. But if I stood it higher up, oh, did you see that one? As it went by, it twisted. Let me grab a couple here. And if I stand up, maybe you can see them better. Let's hope I'll try to drop them on the desk. Okay, ready? Could you see them coming by? The camera only picks them up a little bit. I'll try one more time. It's hard to see that they're spiraling. Oh, I'm sorry. But you can do an experiment. Okay, this might be easier. Some scientists were wondering, and scientists do that a lot. They wonder a lot. They ask questions. They looked at maple seeds and they saw that maple seeds have two wings. And then they looked at the pine and they said, well, pine only has one. So what's the benefit of that? Which one will travel the farthest? A two-winged seed or a one-winged seed? And you can try that. You can make seed wings like I did, just cut them out. I used the index cards because I have a lot of index cards. You could tell, huh? Because I'm making all these. And I made these, and you can see, oh, my sweatpants. These are, see, because of the uh, quarantine, we're inside. So Miss Mary doesn't doesn't get out of her sweatpants. So I fried something a couple of weeks ago, and the oil got on the pants. So don't pay attention to Miss Mary's pants, okay? Here we go. So you're gonna drop both of them and see which one's going to hit the ground faster. Did you see it? Did you see it as it went by? Let me see if I turn the camera up just a little bit. Let's see. Maybe this will be better. Let's see. Hopefully. Well, that way I'll still be in the picture. I'm not very tall, but I'm going to try to get up as high as I can. And I'm going to drop them. Ready? Keep watching. Did you notice? I don't know. I hope you did. Which one? Which one hit the ground first? Okay, one last time. Keep watching. Ready? It was the two-winged. The two-winged hit the ground first. Now, maybe because the two wings, and I need to turn my camera down, the two wings are heavier, right? And so they hit the ground first, and the one wing stayed up a little bit longer. So which one's going to travel the farthest? Which one will travel the farthest? I need to bring this down too because my eyes looks like where are you looking at? And so you try it and see what you think. And then maybe you can let me know what you think. Which one would travel the farthest? My experiment, ooh, that's a text. My experiment said the two-winged hit the ground first and the one wing hit the ground second. And so which one would travel the farthest? Okay, so that is going to be your first experiment. And then the second experiment is try what I did. Put the pine cone in some zipper bag that had some water in it. Put some water. It doesn't have to be a lot, maybe a couple of tablespoons. Shake the bag, empty the water out, put the pine cone in and zip it up. It doesn't have to be in the sun. It could be anywhere in your room that you want. And then maybe you could be better at checking it than I was. I forgot and checked in an hour. And let me know how long it took for that that pine cone to close up like it was protecting its seeds, okay? And let me see, is there anything else that I have? No, that's it. That's it. So let me know. Check the pine seeds out, make your own, and try them and see which seed would travel farthest, the one with the two wings or the one with the one. And then also let me know what time you got for your pine cone to close. And also what kind of pine cones you have around you. Okay, thank you. Bye now.